All right, folks, welcome into the live show of the What the Future Is podcast, of course, recorded each and every time in the UPL studio. And Chuck, I have good news. The little red button is saying that we are live, and I got the
Okay,
email as well. So here we go for a
we're ready to
Friday
roll.
morning. Friday morning. Here we go. Yes, folks, we did record 5 wonderful minutes, but it was just me and Chuck on that one. All right, I'll try to. If you're listening, if you're on X tuning in, if you're on YouTube, I will try to find the chat here where you can toss in some questions, and we'll do our best to see them and to answer them if they come in. Now, Chuck, I appreciate you joining the show. First guest ever to come on live, so no pressure, no pressure at all. We should have a lot of fun with this one. All righty. I'm also I'm trying out a new camera and a new battery. So anything could happen for this show. Anything could happen.
So
All
I could
right.
be doing a solo
You
shortly.
you may be solo in 5 minutes here as well. Yeah. You know what to do. You got all the notes in front of you. You're good to go. So all right. So Chuck, obviously harvest time. Um, I don't know how the connection is in the well, I guess it's a little frosty this morning at my place. How about your place? A little cool over there?
It was a little chilly. I thought last night it was we might be in trouble, but
Yep.
it was 6 this morning when I got up at 6, and yeah, so
Yep.
uh, yeah, I think we're okay. Out here, it's all worried about the soybeans and the corn at this point. Otherwise, the rest of the
Yep.
stuff doesn't matter anymore. But that's
Mhm.
what we're worried about.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to convince my wife that we can, like ice wine. The grapes get that ice on it. We're gonna have to make iced tomato sauce and
It's
ice
iced tomato
salsa,
juice. Yeah.
or whatever, because our grass has that little crystal look to it this morning. So I'm gonna be in some hot water now over that one. Um, anyways, all right, Chuck. I thought harvest time. I thought we could go over some of the bigger themes here that are on my mind, and then just run through. I wrote down 10 different crops here. Just a comment or a minute on each crop. We won't start the timer on you. If you want to go longer, that's fine. But it is 10 crops, about half of what you cover. But I thought we could go through the ones that farmers are asking about the most. All righty.
Okay, give her a go.
Okay. So I want to start off with themes here for this morning, and I want to just talk about the the narrative out there that these crops are getting bigger as the combines roll. Now, last year, you remember the crops were as big as they could ever be mid July, and
Hmm.
then we went backwards. This year, early spring drought, crop data coming in suggests larger crops. What are you seeing? What are you hearing out there? Is there something going on with the size of this crop?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is a big shift. In fact, from the last, I would say, even from the last 3 or 4 years, I would say, not just compared to last year. So yeah, we're dealing with some yields, and you hear some of these yields, and you kind of go, "Come on, that's," um, like when you start to hear green lentil yields in the 50s. Like I've never heard of that before, right? I
Right.
mean, I've heard the 10s and 15s too, so don't get me
Mm.
wrong, they're not all, but I went, "Holy smokes, like, can they even be that? Like, I've never heard of that." So
Yeah.
you start to hear those. I think, in a big crop year, you tend to hear those. Like, when it's a terrible crop, you hear all of the lousiest yields, and I think when
Mhm.
it's in a big crop, you're hearing all these big yields because people are like, they're going, "Wow, that's just crazy."
Yeah.
Um, but the general theme, I would say, is that it's bigger than expectations, and in many cases a lot bigger than expectations. So
Mhm.
spring wheat yields that are 20 bushels higher than what they were expecting, or peas 15, 20 bushels higher than what people were expecting. And so it's yeah, we're still trying to dial in on that. We tend to be fairly cautious in, when we lower or raise yields during the season,
Yeah.
because sometimes these things get overblown and things like that. But I think this year we're playing a little bit of catch up, and so um it's quite different. And I may be jumping to the conclusion already, conclusion of the call already, but compared to the last 3 or 4 years, we've had we've had grain buyers generally pursuing farmers. Like, do you got this? Do
Yep.
you have some of this?
Yep.
Are you willing to sell? I think this year it's going to be flipped around, where farmers have to be the more proactive ones and say, "Do you got room?" And that type of a thing. I think it's that shift in mentality is going to be a little tough to take, and a little hard to adjust to,
Hmm.
because I've seen comments guys say, "Well, geez, I'm just locking the bins." Well, yeah, you might be having them locked for a while if that's the case. I think that whole thing, buyers aren't going to be begging farmers for grain this year. I don't think. Um,
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I do think there's just a little change in marketing style. And earlier this year, I had Sarah from Trigger Green join the show, and we talked about how it had, buyers were putting out those specials. My posted bid is, for an example, is 7, and then here's my offer at 750, and then the calls would kind of come in. I'm with you. I think this is going to be a little bit different, and it's kind of part of some of my themes here. My third one we'll get to in just a second. Now, when it comes to yield data, like I'm seeing, obviously we had, I'd call it like a northern prairie drought, right? So the Peace Country, a lot of folks I talk to up there, maybe about 80% of a crop, something like that. Outliers on both sides of that. That's where the most like farmland is that was under drought. Northeast Alberta as well, up in that Cold Lake area, going down into St. Paul, like, very dry there. And then we get over to Saskatchewan, though. Nothing really stands out for me on the dryness side. And then Manitoba, maybe the Swan River Valley area, a little bit dry there as well. But that northern drought, a lot of trees, right, in
mhm,
Saskatchewan, a lot of trees where the drought was
yeah.
this year.
Well,
So,
and I think the bigger story isn't even the moisture. To be honest, I think it's the mild temperatures,
mhm,
because we've had, again, 3 4 years of, a lot of extreme heat and it's during the flowering, the reproductive season for most of these crops.
yep,
And this year was mild. Like, it was, like, there were, I could count probably on one hand the days over 30 degrees out here anyway.
yep,
And, especially during flowering, it was almost ideal. So that's why I think, like, people's yield expectations kind of got adjusted lower during the last 3 or 4 years. And now it's kind of okay, under good conditions, we're seeing what the genetics can really do.
yep,
And so that's why I think there's this surprise factor for a lot of people. And maybe even this, all of the smoke that we had, especially out east here, all of this wildfire smoke that we had
yep,
was, hate to say it, but beneficial. I I
sure,
was
yeah,
I was tell you a quick little story. I was out with some Australians were traveling through from the States, and they came up through Canada. So I took them out to my brother's farm, and so we were out there standing in the field, and so my brother is kind of saying, yeah, that maybe this about the smoke might be helpful and whatever. So this Aussie pipes up and he says, yeah, busloads of farmers are driving up north and lighting wildfires
oh
to
yeah,
help their crops. So anyway,
yeah.
yeah,
New agronomic practice coming
yeah, yeah.
to a farm near you. Yeah. So okay, so I'm with you on the yields, and for me, I'm getting the pictures of the combine monitors, and I'm getting the wheat and the barley specifically. These big smiles about some record-setting yields for those fields, those farms, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, now okay, we got maybe some extra bushels here. What about the export side, like moving this crop along? Because for me, said it for 2 weeks here. I'm a little bit worried about exports. I'm a little bit worried about moving this crop out, but I know you're here to help me get through this, to move past this and say it's all going to be fine. So how are we going to move this thing?
Well, how about it's not all going to be fine, but it's mostly going to be fine. Just
Okay.
just like in the
Talking me off
Princess
the ledge
Bride,
a
he's
bit. Yep.
he's mostly dead, right? He's not completely dead. He's mostly dead. Um,
Hmm.
so sorry for another obscure reference. But anyway, it's one of my favorite movies, by the way. Um, didn't know that about me, did you? But no, I
Learning a
think on
lot,
the
Chuck. Learning a lot today.
on the export side, um, this is a bit of the, like, this is the darkest days right now. Like it feels
Yeah.
that way, right? And so for a number of crops, I mean, you look at the pea market and you look at the canola market, like those are real obstacles in the way of exports. Um, but and it's going to change the stream, if you will, or the pattern of exports to some degree too. So, for example, like China tends to front load a lot of their purchases, and they did that especially last year with canola. They bought so much in the first 2, 3, 4 months, and then we're relatively quiet during the rest of the year, and then of course then it dropped off completely later on.
Hmm.
But compared to that, if you look at Japanese purchases or purchases from the UAE or Mexico or Europe, they don't do that front loading. So they're spreading it out more evenly across the year. So you won't get this big surge at harvest. So it is going to look kind of ugly compared to what that pattern normally is. So it's going to be spread out more evenly.
Hmm.
And it is very much going to vary by crop. I mean, we just had a record wheat export year. We just finished that up at the
Yeah.
end of July. Records for chickpeas as well. Like for a few crops, we had these record years of exports, and so there are some positive things, and I don't know that the conditions have changed to make that not happen again this next year. The wheat market is probably going to be more or less steady or stable, compared to what it was this last year. So there's no
Sure.
reason to say our wheat exports are going to drop off, or some of these crops are going to drop off. It's just right now we're staring this big crop in the face, and farmers are, and I understand the whatever, you're harvesting this crop and you're looking at your yields and going, like, everybody else is getting this too. I better get going. So it
Hmm.
adds to that selling pressure that normally
Right
happens
now.
now.
Yeah.
Everybody's a little or a lot more motivated. I mean, you've had the calls, I've had the calls saying,
Hmm.
like, what do we dump right now? Like, we got to dump something. What do we
Yeah.
dump?
Yeah.
We're getting those kind of calls. So that adds to this worst environment that we have right now.
Hmm.
But no, I think for a lot of crops that don't have these tariff garbage on them, I think I don't see a reason why exports will be down. Same time, are they going to be able to keep up with the increase in production? That's the real tricky part, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other part of it is too, as much as we don't like lower prices tend to buy more demand. So
Yep.
so it may be just a necessary evil, that we need to get stuff moved out, and so on. So when you
Yep.
have
And what's
$6 or $7 yellow peas, well, then you get Pakistan or Bangladesh, or coming in and buying more. So
mhm.
so there is a bit of an offset effect there too.
So, I look at that and say, so we need, lower price to get more, try to get more export business. And that's been a few line companies put out their videos and podcasts as well. And that's what they're saying too. Like we have to get to a price that gets some of that demand going. Uh, the one thing I made note of here is US wheat exports are up 15% year over year. Do you think that's coming out of our exports a little bit, or is it more like a Russia type thing, or is there anything that kind of stands out on U.S. wheat exports?
No, not really. I think it's a positive signal, that
Hmm.
overall side of the market. If their hard red spring exports are up, and that's a positive sign that that's a stronger part of the market, like movement wise, not price
And
wise yet, but movement wise.
yep.
And so it also means that if they do move out more of this early on, then we have some more opportunities again later. I mean,
Mm.
we have unfortunately, some bigger production estimates coming out of Australia now, and
Yep.
that is adds to the little bit of the negative tone on several of these markets too. But that was mostly anticipated, so was already being priced in. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, my last theme before we get to these crops here. I got 10 crops I want to just touch on. Price recovery. I'm looking for like a reference year. Like if I is there a year that seems similar to 2025 in your mind? Like, is there anything that you can look back and say, oh, we saw this similar thing back in, whatever it is?
You're testing my memory here, Ryan. That's for someone my age. That's always a bit dodgy. Um, but
I'm not good. I'm not good at looking back either, trying to
Yeah, see,
figure out in
that's
my
why I
mind.
have
Yep.
spreadsheets, and
Yep.
usually do those kind of things. What does tend to happen, like I'm still fairly confident for most of the crops that we are going to see a seasonal recovery. So this is still seasonal. It's deeper and it's pushed later because of the delayed harvest. That
Yep.
seasonal bottom is pushed lower and pushed later than it usually is. But for most of the crops, again, the ones that aren't facing these trade barriers, well, even canola, we're going to see a recovery. Um, but
Yeah.
it's going to be a little bit later, and it's going to be muted. It's going to be people are going to kind of go meh. It's not going to be a radical, you know, you know. Take off kind of price environment. So
Hmm.
that tends to be when we have bigger crops. That tends to be the pattern. I don't recall as 2013 one. It's 2020 was maybe a little bit that way. But it's a little bit yeah, it'll tend to shift that a little bit. And then, like I was saying before, when you have, for some of these crops, you don't have that big fall purchase um, window,
Hmm.
then it'll tend to spread that out a little bit more. So for something like red lentils, for example, and we'll talk about more about that later. But I think there's room for some strength there. But even in a normal year, red lentil bids don't typically rally hard at harvest time.
Hmm.
It tends
Yep.
to peak in spring, so there's going to be some patience required for a bunch of these, for probably most of these crops, because as prices do start to rise, all of this stuff that's sitting in bins, it's going to get put onto the market, and we'll tend to keep that a lid on that movement as well.
Yeah. So 2013's the year that I wrote down, but 2013 was a gong show for all sorts of reasons. But what I want to highlight for 2013 is that we had, maybe those seasonal lows were a little bit later in the year. It seemed to be that way. Then we had a recovery that started, and it kind of found a peak on a lot of these. And I didn't look at the specialty crops, but canola, wheat, it had a recovery and a peak going into that mid-November, and then that stats can report in the first week of December just crushed us. And of course, we had a movement issue after that. We had a terrible winter, so on and so forth. But I would just, if a word of caution to farmers, tuning in here to this show, I would just say, you know, look for that little window of recovery. Be one of those farms that's maybe a bit more aggressive on getting your some deals done at that point. And because that stats can, it can move markets one way or the other, but it's just a watch out I'd have.
Hmm.
Some of the old traders that I used to work with, they the saying is, a big crop gets bigger, a small crop gets smaller, right? And so just kind of a word of caution there.
Well, and the one thing that I would mention too, though, is because 2013 was like a dozen years ago, and the ability to forecast crop size and things like that, I think has gotten better. Not just StatsCan wise,
Sure.
but
Yep.
so I don't know that we'll be. The one thing I do remember about that year is that it really caught people by surprise. And
Hmm.
I don't know that
Yep.
people are going to be caught by surprise this year. I think it's already being priced into, like, quite a bit bigger yields are already being priced into, what's happening in the cash markets and in futures, and I think we're already seeing that happen. So
Yep.
hopefully, we'll get rid of the bad news, the bearish news early, and then move to it's not going to turn radically bullish, but just to a normal kind of a pace. And the other thing is
Okay.
too is that December StatsCan report, people people have gotten, over the last 12 years, have gotten a little more skeptical about those numbers as well.
Fair
It's just
enough.
saying.
Fair enough. Yep. You bet. All right. Okay. So I got 10 crops listed here in order of how often they come up on my phone right now. So I want to start off
I'm
with
going to say green lentils. Let me guess, green lentils.
I had red and green as category one, but then I did separate them. I put reds first and greens second.
Oh,
But you
reds
can
first.
start
Okay.
wherever you want. Because actually, the last question on my phone here from late last night was about green lentils. So why don't we start with the green lentil market and just a comment on what stands out for you price wise.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. Yeah, let's get the really bad news out of the way first, and then we can move on from there. Yeah, the green lentil market. I mean, it's basically collapsed, and it's still trying to figure out those yields, as I mentioned earlier. Like just some eye popping yields out there. Some
Yeah,
like disappointing ones too. Don't get me wrong, but some eye popping yields and that and the acreage thing. I was looking at the Alberta Ag or Alberta AFSC, their crop insurance records, because I was trying to sort out did green lentil acreage increase as much as StatsCan said, because it's up
sure.
like it's up big time. Um, and in Alberta, there was as many green lentils insured as there were red lentils. So it was a 50-50 split in Alberta, acre wise.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Oh wow. Oh wow is what I said too, or something
You
worse.
might have thrown a curse word in there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so that idea that there are lots of green lentil acres and a lot of small green lentil acres out there too, that probably increased the most. So we have that, and then these eye popping yields. And the problem with green lentils is, as we were talking before about lower prices buying more demand, that's hard to do with green lentils. We sometimes look at India as buying kind of these excess green lentil supplies to substitute for their pigeon peas. Um, the problem with that right now is that they're also buying cheap pigeon peas from Africa.
Okay.
So they don't necessarily, even if their India's pigeon pea crop is not great, they don't have to substitute. They don't have to use green lentils as the substitute. They have other sources. So it's going to be really tough to market green lentils this year. And the to make matters worse, if they weren't bad enough, is you do have a limited marketing window. I mean, people are disagree about how long it takes green lentils to discolor, but at some point they do. So you can't
Okay.
hang on to them for years and years like you can with reds.
Okay. Yep.
So so there is more urgency to move them as well too. Yeah, but I
Okay.
mean that's a year and a half, 2 years down the road from now. Um, but yeah, so that one is like to talk about a seasonal recovery. That I don't see at all. Like I think there's going to be every time it pops a half a cent or a cent a pound, there's going to be so much dumped on the market. It just go right back down again and stay flat.
Okay.
And it still hasn't quite found its footing yet.
Okay. All right. Well, let's try to spin this into reds then. A little better optimism in the
I
reds.
think so. And the reason is, well, red lentil acres according to StatsCan were actually down this year.
Okay.
According to StatsCan. So
Yeah.
so yeah, you have big yields again for those, but it's not. Um, it isn't as much of a production increase, or in fact, production may be roughly flat in Western Canada. So
Oh, okay.
so that's relatively positive.
Yep.
Like I think it's kind of gotten caught up in this selling fervor or furor that's happened.
Everything seems to have.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So it's gotten caught up in that. Um, the other thing is too is that red lentils you can buy more demand from places like other South Asian countries. Prices drop, these other countries will step in and buy.
Hmm.
So I think that's gonna help the market. I think Turkey will be a larger buyer as well too, and so that's I'm more optimistic for a recovery in reds, versus no optimism for greens. There's some optimism for reds, but it's gonna take a while for that to work through the system. And Australia did produce a record crop, by the way, or is producing a record crop.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so that's not helpful. But I think with lower prices, we'll see movement, and then eventually some sort of price recovery a little bit later this year.
All right. Sounds good. You did mention, more of a spring type seasonal peak for red lentils earlier in the
Yeah.
recording. So there's that too. Now, do
And
you
oh,
want
sorry,
to?
and one other thing, got to throw in one other thing is we don't know what Indian farmers are going to plant this winter. So
Okay.
that's when they plant their lentils. So, that's that's another wild card in the mix too.
Okay, fair enough. Now, do you want to keep going down with pulses? I had durum next, but below that I had yellow peas and green peas. Do you want to just keep going with pulses?
Yeah.
We have
Again,
bids.
it's
We have a green pea bid again. So there's some
wow.
positivity there. Yes.
We have a
$10, I
bid.
believe. We have a bid. Yep.
Okay. It is something that we've been watching and warning about ever since China put these tariffs on. Like in some ways, we focus on the China tariffs on canola, but I think the impact on peas. I mean, while you look at the prices, you know, um, yellow pea prices dropping from $10 down to what, 6.50, $7 and something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
625 to
like
7.
like that
Yeah.
that to me is a much bigger impact than the impact on canola, to
Hmm.
be honest. um, and and here's the other ugly thing, and I texted you earlier
Yep.
this week about that, is that because prices have dropped so much, India is talking about putting tariffs back onto yellow pea imports. So like that would just, then you may as well just, I don't know, start burning them in your pellet stoves or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like it's going to be really, um, you know, again, you can buy a little bit more demand from some of these other countries, and I think that's going to help. But if you have both India and China out of the market, um,
What do you have left?
what do you got? Yeah, you got not much left.
Yeah.
And so let's, maybe we should all be cheering on Scott Moe as he goes over to China and tries to fix things over there.
Yep.
Uh, you know,
The yeah, the yellows. Someone asked me to budget a price for yellow peas for next year. Yeah, they said, we're trying to figure out our crop plan, and we're harvesting. Fertilizer application will start right away. And I said, this is crazy, but I'm just gonna say 7. And I hope it's a lot better than that. But I think I start with a 7. I don't think I want to go down into the 6s at this time. But yeah, like it's tough until we get some clarity around China, or maybe Scott Moe will go down there and fix things for us in the next few weeks, and I can put an 8 in that budget.
yeah,
But
and he'll be
yeah,
elected, for the rest of his, as long as he wants to be elected for.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay, so greens? We do ship some greens to China as well, but we sell small quantities to a pile of countries. The last I checked, green peas went from here's a bid to no bid, no movement, and now back to some type of bid out here. What are you thinking on the green pea market?
yeah, I mean, China is about a quarter of our exports, so not nearly and India is not in that picture at all. So we don't need to worry about in what India is going to do for green peas.
Hmm.
Um, it's a little bit like the green lentils, though, is that beyond our regular customers, it's really hard to buy a bunch of There's not a bunch of countries out there. Like if you think about the use of green peas, either in dried in bags, like for human food, it's mainly human food, and it's all. Like how many more bags of dried green peas are people going to buy, or or rehydrated? They used to in China, they would rehydrate them and freeze them. Uh, like how many more frozen peas are people going to buy? All of those kind of things.
Yep.
So it's really hard to boost demand for green peas. So we will be looking at a heavy supply situation for that as well too. But again, we're not as beholden to China. But I would think that a lot of that trade for the next year has already been done, and so it's going to be really limited dribs and drabs of export movement,
Hmm.
and selling opportunities for farmers. So again, like we were talking about right at the beginning, is they'll have to be vigilant. And they'll have to be the ones in contact with buyers to say, you got an extra 2 bits, or you got it, whatever, for a green pea bid right now, and then be willing to jump on those when they do show up.
I was going to make a note here. Christmas 2025. Buy something for your grain buyers. Just get on their good side. There we go. Well, for
You might
green
want to do
peas,
the meals in the fields for them instead of them doing them for you.
yeah, yeah. Here, I'll bring you a steak. Let's get some better bids going. So green peas, we had more acres from what you can tell, right, this year, more acres. And then I did hear of a quality issue in southern Saskatchewan on some high bleaching. I don't know if more acres, bigger area, more yield. Is that quality going to come into play? You know,
Yeah, I think there
price
will be
wise.
enough decent quality. I mean, they can make it work. I'm not discounting the quality losses, and it's probably something we should have talked about for basically for a bunch of crops is
Hmm.
some of these quality issues, like with this getting the rain in July and then all this regrowth and in the durum and all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So there's all kinds of issues in chickpeas, all kinds of issues going on. In the case of green peas. Um, yeah, or they just have more. They'll have to color sort them a little more vigorously, or I'm not
Hmm.
sure how that process all works. But um, I don't think it's going to cause a huge amount. It's not going to cause a real shortfall, but you will see those grade spreads widen out. And again, for a bunch of crops, you'll see that happening. Uh,
Yeah, I saw it was $10 or $11 for under 3% bleach, and then $8 for five. I want to say 5 to 6% bleach, but I that could be wrong.
mm,
But something like that. So I think it was $2 to $3
yeah.
spread on those. And anyway, okay. Let's keep moving on here now. I wanted to switch gears to Durham because I was looking at Durham prices yesterday in central Saskatchewan, and I saw a 750, and it wasn't long ago where that bid was at 875. So where uh, where are you at on Durham? Maybe quality, any quality issue on Durham? Obviously, must be some bigger yields coming in with a drop like that. But where are you at on Durham?
Yeah, there are bigger yields, but Durham is one of the ones where I think some of the quality issues are going to be the greatest. So hearing all kinds of downgrading, lightweight,
Yeah.
black point, which somebody told me, I don't really understand what black point is. I can get a visual picture of it, or HVK, or different. So there's a bunch of different quality issues. Now I don't know whether the second half of the Durham harvest is going to be better, but it's that staginess of the crop as well too, that's causing will cause a bunch of issues. So
Yeah.
I think that's gonna really widen out those spreads if they haven't already. I would imagine they have already. I don't have that top of in hand right now, but we'll still see that. The Durham market was already going to be, like, we're finished. I think Durham was one of the ones where we had a record export year this last year.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. Um, we're not going to be able to duplicate that, because North Africa wasn't a disaster this year. European crop is bigger, and they're exporting more right now, things like that. So we're not going to be able to repeat last year's record, which we really would really be great if we did. If we But even, here's the thing about the Durham market, and is that even though we were exporting at a record pace, bids were basically flat for, like, especially the second half of the year. They didn't budge.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so that tells me that there's still, fair amount of Durham sitting in bins. Um, and so yeah, I think that's one where we'll see, some modest growth, but I'm like a recovery, but it's going to be really hard fought. And again, uh, it'll be worth finding the buyers who need to fill a train,
Yep.
and that type of thing,
At
to
a
stay
certain
on those kind
spec,
of.
maybe. Yeah, maybe you
Yeah,
got the spec they need or something like that. Okay.
yeah. I mean, the one thing about all of these crops is, and again, jumping back to some of the themes earlier, but that it's really caused people to look at their crop budgets and figure out their break even prices again, based
Yeah.
on if you have an 80 bushel wheat crop or a 60 bushel wheat crop. That does a lot to your break even price and things like that. So it's,
Yeah.
people need to recalculate those and see where they're at.
Yeah, we did an exercise here in August, early August, just going over that total dollars coming in for each farm, and in some cases, we layered in some crop insurance expectations as well. But just to give a big picture sense, and in some cases in a lot of cases we had some shortfalls, and now with these bushels coming in, we're just like a grower the other day said, well, Ryan, what do you think about me selling this extra wheat? And I said, you know what? We had a gap of I think 180 grand on the whole farm, and I'm like, selling that is going to fill, I think it was 80 grand worth of that gap, and you still got 3 other crops to harvest. So,
Mm.
like if you think about it that way, um, I don't know. We're trying to get to plus. So yeah. Anyway, okay. So do you want to switch to spring wheat now? We've talked durum. Do you want to switch to spring wheat and keep on that kind of that wheat theme?
Sure. Spring wheat is one that's uh, been getting dumped on all last year, and and especially in the last few months and things like that. People just talking about wheat is a dog, and it's just, but it's also been really steady, or like
Yeah,
relatively steady, right?
yeah.
It hasn't been hammered to the same degree as some of these other crops. It's still not wonderful, and it's not super bullish or things like that. But it's been one that's just been steady because it's part of
It's a
a much
slow,
larger global market.
it's a
So,
slow
you talk about green
grind.
lentils, and that's
Yeah,
Canada and the US.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Spring wheat or wheat in general, like that's part of the whole thing. And so it tends to moderate those kind of those moves as well,
Hmm.
for better or for worse. And so, that's one where again, I think we're going to see some strength right now. We're in the middle of this weakness. We look at the U.S. corn market is actually starting to recover from its lows, and that's a bit of a
Yep,
seasonal
yep.
move as well too. And then maybe the wheat will get pulled higher along with that. So, that's one that aside from bin space, that's one where I might not be dumping it now. And again, there's 11% protein out there, and we're hearing 18% protein in the piece.
Mm,
You
hmm.
know, so you get the whole massive range there. But yeah, I think that's one where you maybe if you've sold some earlier, then for sure you can afford to sit on that, I think, and wait for some of that seasonal tendencies and seasonal improvement. And yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think spreads. There's a small protein premium that started to pop up here for some 14.5%. So I'm a little bit curious on how that develops, if there's anything there or not. I'm not that optimistic on it, but it's take note of that.
Mhm.
Um,
Can I
did you want
throw
to
in
say
one
something?
other? Again,
Yep.
it's not a wheat specific comment. All these things are coming to mind as we're
Sure.
chatting. And so Britt Nielsen, right?
Yep.
And so
All
she
bushel.
she
Yep.
messaged me the other day, and she says, I'm hearing that rail freight is going to be going way up.
Hmm.
And I dug into it a little bit, and I went back and I looked at last year, and the rail freight started the year really high. And I'm not sure how this works with revenue caps or things like that, but the rail freight, continued to drop during the year. And so if you looked at it in October, November, wherever your point is, by the
Yep.
time you got into like early spring, it was like $12 or $13 a ton lower, the rail freight.
Okay. Yep.
So even that, if you're looking at well, even if prices in general are staying flat, you can maybe pick up something. And I'm not sure if it has to do with rail freight or the freight, the revenue cap.
Hmm.
Um, but there's something that you know uh, that may give you a better basis or a better cash bid or whatever.
We did see basis improve all year long. The futures maybe had that slow grind, but those prices just kind of kept staying, and then did find some peaks in the spring.
Yeah.
Now, my strategy for wheat this year has been very aggressive, moving it in these early movement programs. I want to call them. They don't feel special, so I don't want to call them special. But just with farms that are comfortable with re-ownership strategies, right? Like
Yeah.
re-ownership down the line, and again, I don't think throwing it all in the bin and locking it up is the way to do it right now, but we will see. Time will
Yeah,
tell.
and there were those specials, um, just before harvest really got underway. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We've got barley or oats. Anything stand out on those? That's crop. What are we at now? Crop 6, no 7 and 8. So we got barley, oats, and then we'll finish with canola flax.
Okay, barley. I think some of the quality, there are some quality issues for sure, but I think the
Hmm.
people that I've talked to that have taken some off, they're there's some with chitting and with that kind of thing that they notice, but there's I think there's going to be plenty of malt barley out there, malt
Hmm.
quality barley, and some really nice yields, especially in Alberta. And probably Saskatchewan too, but that
Yep.
central Alberta area, they're really they've been in this bit of a sweet spot this year, and so I think we're going to have lots of barley. The concern is, and this is talking to a guy, a broker from southern Alberta, but he says, cattle numbers are we're struggling with you know getting feeder cattle. We're struggling, with the rain we had later in the year. Pastures or whatever, so they're not going to be putting them on feed as early as they usually do, and so on. So our domestic feeding might be kind of challenged. Of course, when I talked to him, corn was at its lowest point,
Low. Yep.
and so corn looked like it's going to be flooding in, and now it's bounced and is actually back at a premium to barley and to feed wheat and so on.
Yep. Yep.
But again, if you have quality issues with wheat, quality issues with durum, some of those kind of things, some of that's going to flow into the feed channel. So I think our
Hmm.
domestic feed um, output or our usage is going to be lower this year for barley specifically. So we really need to rely um, on the export market, which is essentially China. So thankfully,
Right.
they haven't put tariffs on barley yet. Um,
Did they just forget about that one, or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's hope they just kind of keep forgetting about it.
Yeah.
So we really need that. I think barley again. It's people dumping it right now and so on. So it pushes it even lower, which means that there is some room for recovery, but it's going to be pretty quiet. I think on average, our malt premium is 50 or 60 cents a bushel or something like that, which is historically low. Um, but
Yep.
you know, it may not improve much from that during the year. So that's the quick and dirty on barley.
So what you're telling me is the malt offer I got is a buck 70 higher than our local feed price. I should probably jump on that one. On that
Yeah,
trade.
talking to one of the maltsters earlier in the year, he's putting out these bids, and like he just couldn't. Nobody was interested.
Hmm.
I kept thinking, yeah, you might want to be interested,
Yep.
but I think now they're starting. He's getting more calls, and yeah, just
Yep.
like all of the buyers, right? They're getting stuff offered to them.
The other I chatted with David, who's my feedlot alley contact, and he's saying very similar things. The other thing I'll note in here is so seasonal bottom. He said usually comes in at the end of next week for feed barley and Lethbridge, so that might get pushed a little bit. But he also said, for the market, the reseller market, like they've booked everything into next spring. It doesn't mean they're right, but
Hmm.
they've booked the values that they are coming to the farmers with. There's carry in there. We're in a carry market and all that stuff. But he said your gains are just really limited when everybody thinks that this is how it's going to play out. You have to change their mind. And sometimes we can't do that till the next growing season. So
Yeah,
anyway, all right, good stuff there. I'm
oats.
seeing oats, prices drop a little bit. Seeing some premiums for gluten-free oats right now. Big crop? I'm thinking on the oats as with the wheat, the barley. Oats must be similar.
Yeah, I mean, the yields are big from what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing much about test weight or things like that on the oats. So
Okay.
I can't really say, whether it's plump or thin. I would imagine with the rain later in the season that helps it plump up, and so you shouldn't have those issues. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, oats have held up better than a lot. I mean, we were going into the end of 24-25 with some fairly low stocks, and so I think that's one that's gonna, again, it hasn't collapsed,
That's right.
and
Yep.
to me that's a bit of a positive sign. If it hasn't
Yep.
collapsed yet, I think that's, and harvest is, especially in eastern prairies, is further along, and on the
Yep.
oats. So if it hasn't done that yet, I think we're in some decent shape for oats. Again, be a good sized crop. and I don't expect a rally to the moon or anything like that.
Yep.
But we don't have to, compared to some of these crops where you just you drop down to the super low seasonal low. With oats, you haven't really, it's kind of dished out at the bottom, but not a. So that's a to me that's a positive sign,
Hmm.
um, and it's mostly the U.S. market, so we need to keep supplying them well. But no, I'm it's one of the crops I guess that I would be a little bit more optimistic on.
Good. Well, we need some of that. So that's good. I'm with you on that one. Okay. We got canola and flax to wrap up here. Canola, I believe I read this morning, was 2 or 4% harvested in Saskatchewan. So very early on from a yields perspective. Obviously, Scott Moe going over to China to try to smooth things over for us over there. Um, you know, I was reading your latest report yesterday. You've got carryover climbing a little bit year over year. Anything else kind of standing out in the canola market for you?
Well, I mean, if China were to drop those tariffs, I mean, heck, we've got them all priced into the market now, and we also
Yep.
priced in now a bigger Australian crop and things like that. Um, but I think that's one where we are. I think we're probably oversold, or we're close to being oversold now. I
Hmm.
think some of these bargain buyers, like maybe Europe, UAE, Pakistan, even we used to export, or there have been years where we've exported 6, 7, 800,000 tons to Pakistan.
Yep.
So it's not China, but it's not nothing either.
Yep.
And so, and we have the Cargill plant coming on, and later this year, and a Dreyfus expansion in Yorkton, and all of that.
Yep.
So those are all helpful things. I think we're going to struggle to, you know, like I'm not big on price prediction, as you know,
Hmm.
um, but I think we'll struggle to get back up to where we were just before harvest. Like the thing on canola is that's one of these ones where yields can really vary a lot
Hmm.
depending on the growing conditions. And this mild year, I think that one might be one where we see even bigger surprises on yields than some of the cereals. That makes me a little bit nervous, but I think we're going to see um, uh, some other countries step in and do some buying
Sure.
to help offset that. So I'm going to a broker, broker yesterday, um, and so when we were talking about Australian canola going into China, he says, "Yeah, that's a bad thing." I said, "No, no, 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 that's a good thing. We want Australian barley to go into China, so then we can move into Japan, or increase volumes to Japan, where Australia
Right.
normally supplies." Um, but I had to think too is that that's great for this year, but if Australia regularly has an inlet into China,
Yeah.
later on once this gets resolved, and we can cross our fingers and hope Mr. Mo is successful, and uh, um, that who knows, miracles do happen.
Well, and I think too that the canola has the potential to pop and pop when there's a positive headline, with the biofuel policy stuff, to pop when, it might be the simplest thing where Mo gets back and says, we had great talks and this is what we figured out. Like you can have those pops. Um, you just got to be ready to rock and roll when they
Yeah,
happen. So, all right,
yeah.
let's wrap it up here with flax, which is the crop that I sit there and I sleep well thinking about flax margins. Price is still holding on. I know harvest for flax is probably ahead of us yet. But any comments around the flax market?
Well, it's a little bit like we were just talking about with oats, is the fact that it's dropped, but not precipitously, um, and so to me that's kind of favorable. We had
Yep.
more acres this year in Canada and in the U.S. and things like that, and we'll see what the yields are. They'll probably be good, like every other crop. Um, the I don't know that I would be um, sitting back. I don't know if I'd go into this fall being completely unsold on flax at
Hmm.
at $16 or whatever those bids are right now. I think some selling should get done, and the reason I say that is because Russian and Kazakh crops are a lot larger than they were last year. And so at some point, you know, Europe will buy from Kazakhstan and from Russia, even with
Hmm.
tariffs. They buy from Russia and China. We haven't sold much into China for years now, so that one we won't have access to that market. So it'll still be largely the U.S. and Canadian demand. So wanting to um, it may get tougher a little bit later on in the year. I don't think the price is going to collapse, but it's again, it's margin wise that still works. And especially
And
if yields are
yields
good.
might be,
Yeah,
yeah, yields might be very good for flax.
yeah.
So yeah, for sure. All right, Chuck. Well, we kept you way over time here for Friday morning. I do appreciate you joining the What the Futures podcast live show. How can people get your information? You still doing free trials out there? How can people access your content?
Yeah, we want people. It's not just we're trying to hook people with a free trial. I
Hmm.
don't want to have someone subscribe if they haven't tried it out and know what they're getting. So if you go to leftfieldcr.com, there's a button right on the homepage for free trial, whatever, and we'll put you on for 4 weeks, and then we'll ask you after that whether you want to continue or not. And that's the best way to know what we're doing and whether it fits for you. So we got a number of different products and different reports and so on. So yeah,
Yep. Perfect. Perfect. And folks, if you want to catch any of my stuff, head over to ryandenis.ca. You can find out info on the conference, on the Lunchbox crew, um, all that stuff. Podcast is all up there as well. So thanks so much, Chuck, for joining me on Positive Friday here. Hope everyone has a great harvest weekend. And you can catch this episode as a podcast here shortly as well. If you didn't catch it all, it'll be on the podcast on your favorite podcast channel shortly. So take care, Chuck. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you real soon. All right.
sounds good.